Jom den den jambe yong la sha sa lo kang ge lo jue de mien jen tra nie tra nam da ra sa ve chi nie dong ge che je zai che ni je tu kra le wan ze kong da se be chen ra ma re men tang do ne che ze ve Rosoi kun lai buje tarze yin lai chui ju yong den song Zhu darai che zhu nyo mo nye gong le je cha zhu zhong ze xin Ma re nun si re du ngen yu gu che nye chen ze ra zhe nam Den e ta xin sa ju tar se yun den lu zu ya se tu yu gu Chun trai chu dan chu ni jian zhe da le men sen zhen bei yong lai lu zai den che che chen re se re che da le de mo men ba ra se la ne ga dan den zhe yong lu dou ba ye lo zhe po be nong wa zao tu Nam da zu zhim ser je sa ye den den zhe ba me ren ge ben zhe xiram ye de nong we che gun sa ra tun chong ro we la ma sha ge yu lo ring kam sa we men ru dam be su rem ye lam je lo bu che ma jong de xin gu yin zhe bu den zhe be yong zhe la ma ju bre che la du Sarab Gundu Si Ye Tani Le Tamge Samu Shag Yong Song Xin Shang Chum Yin Bu Lam Gen Karma Ba Mi She De Ji Wu Zu Ge Du La So Dene Jab Sun Rove Sem Dang Shong Chup Cho De Ge Shong Chup Ji Sem Yi Ye Su Tembe Go Ne Tambe Chu Sen Ro Nang
So please begin by taking refuge in the three jewels and to generate both perspectives of the body mind.
Daga na shin da kazang da jidang kazang ti che yong de nga zu ba le de ga sho ge lab ja tembe kap tla re de la chikje ye ye benan chikje dang ko tre.
So today's part of the text sets forth what a bodhisattva does not do. So it's about enumerating what a bodhisattva should give up in terms of his behavior in the context of words, thoughts, and deeds.
Tati sholokate rangi tulba rangi mata na chöpe sukji chömin she sikpe deshir jundu rangi tulba la tang ne pongwa yaserwa yin sigi sholokate de tengi yore.
And here the author says, if you don't examine your own confusion, you may become a charlatan in the guise of a Dharma practitioner. Therefore, always looking into your own confusion and leaving it behind is the practice of a bodhisattva. So here the practicing bodhisattva is told to be his own judge, his own witness in terms of actions and their source that would contradict his path, the path of a bodhisattva.
다 나랑 라 유지 책거나 나랑의 책이 다 유였을 때고 말와.
The reason why this advice is given is that each individual will know himself the best.
대인들 내 눈투 가르쳐 근도 민도 나랑 때네 람상 외신 투바지다 눈투테 봉투바 지쳐버려서.
So the advice is keep a close look at yourself in terms of the course of your actions. In order to immediately notice when you're about to take a direction which would contradict the path of a bodhisattva. So correct yourself immediately, as it were, because by doing so, you will avoid engaging in actions that are detrimental in terms of you developing on the path.
Tene ta nantru de ngösene pongtumna tene nantru jema de yongmare.
And once one has gotten used to doing just this, then by nature of or by way of this habit, to be mindful of one's own mistakes, one's own confusion, and prevent actions detrimental to the path of a bodhisattva. By way of that habit, or rather, the longer that habit is at hand, the weaker one's tendency to engage in actions detrimental to the path of a bodhisattva. Become, or that habit to engage in such actions become weaker and weaker.
Ta di kabla rani ta cheje pa ji yimbe samna chi tangne dorna rang ju de rang tak je ya bo chi ma tangne chebe soda wo chi ma to che nam da de yong ye kha ku shi bu ji ye de ba rang tak je ma tangna.
And it's necessary to correct oneself and to be mindful of one's own confusion and actions happening because of confusion, actions detrimental in terms of or detrimental as to being able to make progress on the path of a bodhisattva. Now, if the practitioner doesn't maintain that kind of mindfulness and therefore doesn't correct himself, even though he may see himself and present himself to others as a practitioner of the Buddha Dharma, in spite of that claim, he's simply a charlatan. He isn't a proper practitioner of this path.
Pen rani nangbe chokur shuk deva ji inju che. Ta yimbe soda bu che ne. Sanje ji songrab la chesam ji theba zanna. Yin le thag ben tongwa me pa shonjing gi sambe sen na.
Shen la.
Thag ben tongwa me pa. Shon zembe samna ji yeba yina. Ngender lhangwa me samsam ji yeba yina. Dit theba te toba shinchulu songra.
An example in this context would be the following. Think of a practitioner of the Buddhist path who has extensively engaged in Buddhist studies, for example. This practitioner has focused on this Buddhist practice in particular, Now, in spite of having studied the Buddhist scriptures extensively, this practitioner still has, or this practitioner, in spite of his extensive learning, still maintains a sense of superiority toward others. Being biased, meaning he sees himself as superior to others. There is this basic sense of I'm better than the rest, perhaps because of his extensive learning.
When
that occurs, what has happened is that the so-called Buddhist practitioner has failed in his practice of the Buddhist path. In this case then, or in terms of this example, in terms of him focusing on learning the various perspectives of the Buddha's doctrine. So this is failed practice. This is not Buddhist practice. It is failed practice.
Sambare, Gambare, Shonzing Gekten Pebayina, Sama Shinjum also.
And if this practitioner, who has this mindset, goes on to attempt to practice contemplation as well as meditation, in both instances, contemplation and meditation, the practices will be failed practices because the attitude rather of his mindset contradicts the Buddhist path and its principles. So no matter what type of Buddhist practice he attempts to do, that practice is called, or will be called, a failed practice. It's not a Buddhist practice. It's a practice which contradicts the Buddhist path and its principles.
Tanda Guru Peme de la du yi want Mandro Chebore song.
In this context, the well-known Indian Buddhist master, Padmasambhava, in Tibet also known as Guru Rinpoche, set forth 4 perspectives of a mindset which contradicts the Buddhist path and its principles. And he called these, or he named rather, these 4 perspectives detrimental forces, meaning, or destructive forces, meaning these are perspectives in terms of a given mindset that disrupt Buddhist practice.
Lobjong de nghe lobjong de trak shui yin nghe cholung de trak shui yin dan jikding ge ton de chena de ne ta chonjing ge samba tam na chi yoro.
The first of these disruptive forces, which prevent someone from making any sort of progress on the Buddhist path, is this sense of superiority just mentioned in brief. It may be a sense of superiority in the context just described, a person who has studied extensively and therefore sees himself as better than others, presuming that this is true because of his wider knowledge, intellectual knowledge of the Buddha's doctrine. There may be various add-ons here, as it were. This practitioner may also feel superior in terms of the Buddhist branch he belongs, seeing his branch as the best of all Buddhist branches. Tene sumpa di kare song song pe. Da kongi chuluk de yakshu re tene yang yakshu shenta shik song song.
Ta ne panang lusun de yare nge tawan de yare tanji ngan le la me some short.
Well, it's endless, the possibilities of reinforcing this sense of superiority by the failed practitioner. As was said, thinking his tradition is better, the viewpoint of his tradition is the best, it's incomparable, and so on and so forth. Now, if we look at a worldly setting that has nothing to do with any religion, Buddhism or otherwise, this is a very common mindset in the world at large as well, where many people have a sense of superiority. They feel they are better than the rest for various reasons. And here again, the reasons for the sense of superiority are endless in terms of the mind inventing reasons for why the person is better than the rest.
Perna chö passion jikting di nang de zonyu mang chewate yakab yinanda merig yinanda popomo yinanda zasong yinanda nyota mang chewate shonzeng delten yongbe.
This sense of superiority, the sort of, it may not even be a pronounced thought at all times, I'm better than the rest. It's just you see yourself in the light of you being a person that's better than the rest. And in the world, this is the origin of conflicts between various nations. This is the origin of conflicts between different groups of human beings in terms of race and the like. This is a source of conflict in households, in marriages, in the context of which gender one is or isn't, and so on. All variations of a sense of superiority are disruptive. They wreak havoc on those concerned. Nothing good can come of it. And a person whose mindset is in the grip of this kind of disruptive force, in terms of how he sees himself in relation to the rest, whether it's in the context of a religious system or just in the context of the world, the effect is the same. This individual's mindset will be a mindset of darkness, a mindset which is not bent on virtue, good morals, and the like.
Benata, Chiluchikton Gubjagina, Tangazo Jagal left Savage Kushare, Gedem Benane, then one net, Tane Keva Shampoo, Yamnemba, told Jober Muche, Shunkinjiot.
Kjorpen Rinpoche.
Yeah.
3 hone är det.
Det. Kallu till det på chari token but. Kon. Laram gitam tamja yago yu sara geshik. Tonan ledde varte. Till lebdu kon töson. Ta du ji shu chon son. Tam nga geshi khabai sam nga jerchi lebongro wa shonzin chi. Nyamne pajila tindechi gogu yu.
There is the example of someone who did the opposite. A practitioner of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism, and Khenpo Rinpoche explains this occurred sometimes in the 1960s after a large number of Tibetans had fled Tibet and settled in India and in exile in India. Now, in terms of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism, education is emphasized to a great extent. There was at the time a very well-known practitioner in this school of Tibetan Buddhism by the name Trehor Kjorpen Rinpoche. And in terms of the educational system of the Gelug school, you have various levels, and there is always, with respect to each level, an examination which, if you pass it, you're awarded the title of that level of scholarship, and the highest level of scholarship is called Harampa. Now, Trehor Kjorpen Rinpoche was about, to begin with, he was known for a very high level of knowledge of the Buddha's doctrine. He was famed throughout the Gelug school and the main seats of it. There are a number of main seats of this school. Now, he was about to do the examination regarding the highest level of scholarship, as it were. He had been selected for this. Now, his reaction to having been selected was that he fled the monastery where he had settled in exile, apparently expressing the view that acquiring or being appointed to the highest level of scholarship in consequence of the examination might have the effect of inspiring the kind of disruptive force just explained, the one that primarily has to do with a sense of superiority, because of course you would be honored, you would be sought after, and so on within your community to a great extent, having been awarded this level of scholarship. So he simply fled his monastery, never came to the examination, saying, in terms of my practice of the Buddhist path, this may turn into a disruptive force, and I do not want to take the risk. And so he chose to drop being appointed to the highest level of scholarship within his tradition in order to secure that he in effect would not engage in a viewpoint and behavior that would disrupt any progress on the Buddhist path. And Khenpo Rinpoche explains this is how a proper Buddhist practitioner thinks.
다가나 신경 구를 못하게 내 가송도 쓰나. 감 킹킹이나 감베 듀스도
감 그래?
낸도서 감 옙데
Guru Rinpoche 가송소.
감베 듀.
Then in terms of the second type of disruptive force listed by Guru Rinpoche, this disruptive force he explained in the specific context of meditation.
탄데 간데치 송비어스나 펜나다 낭바임도 조 낭바치 땐 송비어와 낭베게 라마 트라바 메차 포모 간데치 나타 게 감제기여 스제 감 예긴로.
So this is explained in the context, or what Guru Rinpoche said is said in the context of the Buddhist path in specific. So, in terms of Buddhist meditation, you have various individuals, various Buddhists practicing meditation. Some are lamas, meaning they have some previous meditation experience, hence the title Lama. Some are monks in monastic communities, and some are householders living perhaps in a family. All of them would, to one extent or another, practice Buddhist meditation.
lakpartu ne tangarazo western agi choso mangchage meditation songyarwa.
Now, in terms of Buddhist centers and communities in the Western Hemisphere, there is a great deal of talking about and emphasizing meditation. Most members of Buddhist communities in the Western Hemisphere pronounce the word meditation quite a lot. It's a very frequent word.
Oh, tachi gam jebo sambegen do shetang denso yobate
La?
nga gam jegi yin samben do shetang denso yobate kalba sangboshirare.
Now, the intention to meditate is a very good intention in terms of intentions.
Penna ngata korwanda dungere sha dela tarbeche do nga gamji jebo thane never bachela kamba peba chamtela yang sonam shivuchi yesung.
It's exceedingly meritorious, it's explained. It's an exceedingly meritorious action, it is explained, when someone, because of his or her intention to practice meditation, moves to a secluded place, sets himself up there for the sake of practicing Buddhist meditation.
Yena yang gambe kaptla tene dule dubisawa shubi nyenga yore song.
However, while practicing meditation there, disruptive actions called disruptive simply because they contradict this path of Buddhist meditation may occur.
Take do elect Karesana Pen Semgen Nangla Tarang Yul Lungba Lungche
Jänner Lungpa ser du Kepa kan göra.
Yul Sena Jacob Lungba Sena Longsin Yul Sena Sweden Tene Yul Sinte Tatter Waglander of the doctor. Tene Taganashin Ge Tarang To Ke Desa Tensola Shenzhen Champion, Tiang Gum Cake Days.
De la Karejena?
De la Shamba Chambun Zentangiana, Tiang Gum Cake Days. Tap and a gumchi, Jeb, oh, Tanga Talango, oh, Metin, Lego Tingadua. Then so Kanga Gum Cake Days.
So, while meditating in a specific country, having chosen a specific place for doing so, and settled there, while meditating, there may be thoughts occurring such as, oh, I need to go to such and such a place, or oh, I need to get this or that done. These thoughts are what one calls disruptive intentions. The intention to go somewhere for a specific reason, the intention to do something for a specific reason, simply because they disrupt the practice of meditation. They interrupt the practice of meditation.
Tene, Tate Dule Rapate, Dule Chawate, Gum Pachong Gabla.
Tesgo, Derak Pare.
Yeah.
So, what's the origin of these thoughts? Well, it's attachment to the place, it's attachment to fix things for the better in the place. That's why one wants to go somewhere and do something in specific, because it's good for one's situation in the world to do that. And why do these thoughts surface? Simply because one is attached to the place and the circumstances one has where one lives. And that's why thoughts of going somewhere to do something specific in order to perhaps fix a problem or in order to improve one's situation one way or another are disruptive. Of course, this is a very obvious example of a disruptive force. Presumably, it doesn't escape anyone who hears this that those thoughts and the intentions to go somewhere and do something while trying to meditate, it's quite obvious that these thoughts disrupt the meditation practice. It's not difficult to grasp.
That Havishan Shuna, Pen Gum Junshin Kappa.
Och det gom i kapsulmari.
Tak gam kappa the re, gam yankin drove kappa tinde chet, rakun nam tochrawa.
Me.
Yes.
Lego, gom gapa kapsula jargore.
Gam jab kappa janna digre.
Okay.
Tene gam jab kappa have take the car, dule the car chabrus.
Tarpa toge marava.
되게 다
Di sung sung
야, 단다 타바 톰미도 마시.
Sung ma sung, okay.
맞아. 벤나 차베 감때 믹팅 당제 봐. 네 감게 탑지래 마도 감을실이 실라송들 들어봐.
Mikten la kämpa.
야, 믹팅라 신이 다 믹팅 때라 된 믹팅지 랑 셈게 될라 신 때대 징도가. 리카치
Dina gadroken som det sitter.
양 가로도가 리카치 벤나 딸하치 감바이나 탕가라고질 때 실로달라 하디 예베 남바라고 샤 다 비주얼라이제이션 생긴데 자잠 마시나 감의지 객 뭐마들 차대기요. 늘레직 나는 로에 그냥가 요래.
이게 지금
아.
당연히 이게 지금 then you have a more subtle example of the same type of thing. Which has to do with the details of the actual meditation practice. Think of, for example, someone who focuses on an object of meditation in order to calm distraction, in order to calm the mind. Whether it's in the shape and form of the coming and going of the breath, or in the shape and form of focusing upon a yidam. Perhaps the practitioner has carefully studied a painting of the yidam in order to be able to visualize the yidam, as it were, and use the visualized object as an object of meditation. Now, to become attached to meditation in the following way, in this context, namely, seeing the object of meditation as the meditation and as the most important part of the meditation, is a disruptive force in that this prevents the practitioner from attaining liberation from samsara. The notion that the object of meditation is the meditation, not realizing that any object of meditation is simply a method that one uses for a purpose, and once the purpose has been achieved, then one progresses to another type of meditation, or one rather conjoins insight with the meditation. Of course, an object of meditation is used as to Buddhist meditation. It's used for the purpose of calming distraction and the like, so that the mind becomes one-pointedly focused, rather than being preoccupied with thinking about, I have to go there in order to fix this thing because that will improve my situation type of idea. Those disruptive forces, namely thoughts that make for distraction, have been calmed to get stuck there and persist in that this is the ultimate meditation, is a disruptive force. You're just then, as it were, stuck in a calm state that may be pleasurable. However, it prevents attaining liberation from samsara, because that calm state lacks insight of the true nature of reality. And such insight is the actual purpose of any Buddhist meditation. So methods who brings about just a calm state are to be viewed as temporary methods that one drops once a one-pointed state of mind has been achieved, once distraction has been calmed. Then the calm state is to be conjoined with insight of the true nature of reality. So becoming attached to the object of the meditation and the calm state resulting from it, to the extent where one doesn't go further, to the extent where one does not develop insight, is a disruptive force.
Mikpachigla semsechigdo ne gamyote ngen namto balap shiungro.
So in consequence of being able to focus one-pointedly upon a given object of meditation, in consequence of that capacity, distraction is calmed.
Namto de shiyong to tene ta kuyung ponrabo tang tene ta telape cancerbo. So
there is no object orientation at all except for the given object of meditation. And this is a mindset that makes for the experiencing of an exceedingly calm state, which is a pleasurable state.
And there
is a great risk here, unless the practitioner takes great care, to get stuck there. One doesn't go further. If one, while in the calm state, isn't able to see the nature of the calm state, then what happens is that attachment to this calm state occurs, and that is a cause for trapping oneself in worldly existences. It prevents liberation from rebirth in worldly existences. Now, of course, this calm state is not a bad state, as it were, in terms of, because one can presume that the person in this exceedingly calm state will not, because of the calm state, engage in non-virtue and the like. So it's not an undesirable state from the perspective of the practitioner's resultant behavior.
In
terms of the next rebirth, and perhaps a number of them, the result is good from the perspective of taking a rebirth with very good circumstances, namely in either the realm of form or the realm of no form, where, while in any of these realms, the kind of suffering experienced in the world of humans and lower existences does not happen at all. One simply remains in that calm state, because the realm of form and the realm of no form are both about meditative states, exceedingly calm states. There are, in effect of an exceedingly calm state that has been achieved, also rebirth as a god in the desire realm. And here again, even though all of these various levels in the desire realm may not be about meditative states, they are described as what one may perhaps refer to as paradise-like states. So suffering as we know it does not happen there either, while there. However, this is a worldly state and therefore subject to coming to an end.
Yinayang tarba drunkin chigla dedawate lamji kegin songat keyin barten dukile song.
However, from the perspective of a practitioner who focuses on attaining liberation from rebirth in any worldly existence, these rebirths are seen as disruptive forces, in that while in these good circumstances, because of the exceedingly good circumstances, one is sort of stuck. There is no incentive for going beyond the exceedingly calm state or the exceedingly paradise-like good circumstances one has.
Then
there is the third type of disruptive force that Guru Rinpoche listed, which is about hypocrisy and pretense.
One hypocrisy the Kandejil Segiorasana. Jiktin Chödrak want to song the Vege, Chöpatella hypocritic Segi.
So here that is explained in the specific context of a Buddhist practitioner trapped in or engaging with the so-called 8 worldly dharmas.
Khenpo
Rinpoche says he presumes that all of you have probably heard of these 8 worldly dharmas a lot. They are taught frequently by various Buddhist teachers, so we won't go into these details today.
Donna Jiktin Chödrak Jänner Rodin King Chöpayin Dondo Jinkina. I mention I am Pingamare, Kabayina Pingamare, that Trubeku Trangme Singetole and Jiktin Chödrak Jänner Pingamare, and Lamji Kegre, Dulere.
Now, in brief, any Buddhist practitioner engaging in these actions, the so-called 8 worldly dharmas, is an individual who acts in a hypocritical manner, or hypocritic manner, a person who pretends one thing or another in order to perhaps obtain an advantage and the like. And this may happen to any Buddhist, even those with a very high status within a Buddhist community, for example. even those who are scholars, even those who have the title Tulku. Any Buddhist practitioner, if not taking great care, may fall prey to this disruptive force, which is about engaging in the actions called the eight worldly dharmas. And once that is at hand, the person, in spite of title, status, scholarship, and so on, is a person labeled a hypocrite, a person who pretends one thing or another for the sake of achieving various advantages rather, to make himself look good in the public, for example, or looking good to the public.
That do Jiba Karsong Rebu do Song.
Rebu Kangi Rebu.
Rebu de Tanga San Je Gogundo, Nashon Samba Re Gogundo, Samsung Ge, Reva
Dandokpa.
Oh, Redo Yinter Song.
Then there is the fourth disruptive type of force, which has to do with the goal one wants to achieve, whether it's Buddha the enlightened state or liberation from samsara, or any other level of enlightenment prior to the final goal, Buddha the enlightened state. In that context, a Buddhist practitioner may have a lot of hopes and fears. Hopes of attaining the level of fruition he wants to attain, and fears in terms of not attaining that level of fruition. And these hopes and fears are a disruptive force. That's why Guru Rinpoche said, in fact, one doesn't need to place one's hopes in a guide who will, as it were, take one to the goal. A viewpoint like that may become a disruptive force because of the hopes one places in the guide. Why doesn't one have to place all one's hopes in the guide? Well, simply because there is the so-called Buddha within, or enlightenment within. Mind's true nature is the final goal. One actually is in the possession of it, as it were, even though one hasn't yet seen it. Also, one doesn't need to entertain hopes about benefiting others in so many ways, thinking of this possibility or that possibility to do so. Why? Because whether that occurs or not, namely the benefiting of others, depends upon compassion within. So making plans and having hopes to achieve good for others in the context of outer conditions is not that fruitful, as it were, in terms of actually achieving the benefit of others, because actually doing so can only be achieved on the basis of compassion within.
then call from my chism yuan young. From the you the shiduk chatu mare.
Loma di
You
Yute.
Chödrak Tenpachi Yung Tabyo.
If one takes the example of a spiritual friend who has a lot of students, for example. Now, if the spiritual friend in question isn't an individual of great compassion for others, in spite of his guidance, the students won't be able to make much progress at all, simply because of the lack of compassion within the spiritual friend. And therefore, the students of this spiritual friend won't behave in accordance with the Buddha Dharma simply, because the basic element for that to occurring, namely compassion within, is not at hand in terms of the guide. Therefore, he can't inspire that sort of compassion in others.
But Chitang Chikiton is Shunayang, Lobda Chitang Metan Chila, Gagin Hinji Jen Chitang, Ninja Min King Gagin Chi Parul Kampercheda, they are chingri.
It's quite easy to understand this. Take an example in the world. Look at a school and its various teachers and compare two of them. One teacher who is of a compassionate disposition and another teacher who isn't very much of a compassionate disposition as to educating the students. Usually, the teacher with a compassionate disposition, usually he has a better result in terms of the education of his students than the teacher who isn't of a compassionate disposition. It's very common that these students won't do as well as the students of the teacher with a compassionate disposition. So these are the four disruptive forces described by Guru Rinpoche. Midang
Mimayin che songre, mimayin ke.
Mimayin chikpure.
Ya, tarabala keche gre songre. Di keche tuyete nam to gdu la tene yongyo yore songre.
De ni pare.
Ni patre. Tati nan du ge zawala wote nam to re songre.
Then there is the Kadampa tradition within Tibetan Buddhism, which speaks of two types of disruptive forces. One outer and one inner. The outer primarily concerns so-called non-human beings bent on non-virtue, who because of the circumstances of this kind of rebirth, do have a certain capacity to disrupt those who are bent on virtuous practice, meditation and the like, and who, because of their mindset, a mindset that takes interest in non-virtue, would like to prevent others from attaining liberation from samsara. And this can happen then in various ways. Then there is the inner perspective, which is the mindset of the, in this case, Buddhist practitioner. It has to do with object orientation, namely the mind primarily focusing outwardly, interacting to a great deal with things out there, things in the outer world. And this, on the part of the practitioner, makes for a disruptive force, and it's an opening for the non-human beings bent on disrupting those who try to practice virtue, because of the mindset of the practitioner. Or this kind of mindset, primarily a mindset of object orientation, engaging with the world out there, is like an open door, and that mindset makes it possible for non-human beings to influence the human being in question and prevent the human being from making progress in terms of getting closer to liberation from rebirth in worldly existences. Now, in both India and Tibet, the notion of this dimension of a worldly existence, that of non-human beings, is very common. Ja, det är namntorrande va? Mima in yang gör va?
Det gör det namntorrande da.
Ja.
Nej, du tänner så.
Det du ny pagipere.
Ja. Du tänner så det.
Now, if we take the example of the second of the two disruptive forces here, that of so-called object orientation, namely that the mindset of the person in question is one which focuses outwardly, which is primarily concerned with things in the world out there. This may not even be a Buddhist practitioner, just a regular person in the world. Now, we're looking at someone who lives either in India or Tibet, where the notion of non-human beings is an accepted notion, is seen as a valid notion. Valid in terms of non-human beings being part of a worldly world system, as it were. Previously, we had the same notion here in the Western Hemisphere, but because of science and other circumstances, not very much today. Anyhow, this notion remains in many Asian countries, such as India and Tibet. Now, so if we look at a person living in either of these two countries, being told by a friend, perhaps, you know, that large tree down the road, which you pass every day when you go to work, there is actually a there is actually an evil non-human being, a type of demon residing within it. Now, the Indian person is told this by his neighbor and friend. He has never had the thought of such a being living in that large tree passes every day before. But now, since he comes from a culture where this is a valid dimension of his reality, the dimension of non-human beings being here and there, he sort of, when he passes the tree on the way to his work that morning, takes an extra look at it and feels sort of unsettled a bit. And every day this sense of an evil spirit living in that tree, which passes every day and therefore maybe brings him bad luck, is reinforced. Now, why does this happen at all? It's because of the primarily object-oriented mindset this person has.
Chaza, jiktin di nang la, mema yin shuji yue debre. Ngana namto tinde chilem na, namto ti jesu mema yin terano korne nöge yare mato hindong ting en nang zuyong marwa.
That's riktigt kosong dina mima yin chik rangla till om influence
chena.
So, point made here, there might not at all be an evil spirit living in that large tree, which the person passes on his way to work every day. However, the idea of evil spirits, as it were, is an accepted dimension of reality in this person's culture. So, what may happen in effect of all of this is that even though there is no evil spirit dwelling in the tree there, an evil spirit who, because evil spirits are said to sort of, to some extent, be able to read the minds of humans, an evil spirit out there becomes aware of that this person thinks like this, and that makes it possible for him to influence that person in a detrimental manner, which would harm him one way or another, because this is the goal of the evil spirit, as it were. So, because of object orientation, you become subject to that sort of influence.
Chaza, number to be due, singing the pontumna, signing never the young,
so, object orientation is a disruptive force, as described by this example.
Tagana shinge sharab parut champion do de nang la.
Tenian karchu kyongwel ha yorva.
Yeah.
Non-human.
That did the segue. Kashu la nalde onjuma.
Tira ngalagi. Tingan susuka nangani matak pa karchu kyongwel rock pachiros.
That perna kashu kyongwel la. That Chödrak song must get the Rinpoche which damna.
Yeah.
Tetu yang namtotan rigio.
Now, on the other hand, in those cultures, there is also the notion, with respect to non-human beings, of non-human beings who are bent on virtue and who therefore act in order to support someone engaged in virtue. However, when influenced by such non-human beings, the influence may not be a bad thing, or isn't a bad thing, it's influence as to virtue. However, if attachment occurs here on behalf of the person who gets help and support from these non-human beings happens, if attachment to this situation occurs, then that is also a disruptive force in terms of attaining liberation from samsara. So, final judgment here, or final advice here, don't get too uptight about either good or evil in the context of the world. Because object orientation in and of itself is a detrimental thought. So becoming preoccupied with the support of virtuous non-human beings, or being preoccupied with the possible harm of non-virtuous non-human beings is never fruitful. Both are not fruitful. Now, the most important thing Buddha Shakyamuni pointed out, as is recorded in a Prajnaparamita Sutra, to maintain recollection and being attentive in terms of one's actions as to words, thoughts, and deeds. That's the main point and the most important point.
Yeah, Artishag Loma Mango Yuvinone, that sort of using Lomate, drum them by Jalvin Junetwa, drum them back Harson Yorsana, Kepa Segente, Rang Jundrik to Kinchin Duna, the Kepa Richard. Rang,
yeah. The tomato Mayabomarik.
The Rang Matubna, Rang Matona.
Now, there is the well-known Indian Buddhist master Atisha, who lived and worked in Tibet for many, many years. He passed away there as well. His main disciple, Dromtempa, who became the holder of the line of transmission, as to the transmissions brought to Tibet by Atisha, said the following: a true scholar is an individual who sees his own faults, and a person who isn't a scholar at all is the one who does not see his own faults. That sort of person has no level of knowledge whatsoever, in fact. That is to say, the person who isn't capable of seeing his own faults. So, as a Buddhist practitioner, one of the main points is to, at all times, recollect what occurs in order to see whether a disruptive force is at work or not. To be attentive at all times in order to see whether a disruptive force has been at work within or not. This is one of the most important practices, as it were, of a Buddhist practitioner. Without examining oneself, there will be so many unnoticed faults happening. Object orientation has no end. And as human beings, we do have, as regular human beings, we do have a mindset trapped in the 84,000 types of afflictive obscuring states.
And
the 84,000 dharmas the Buddha set forth are nothing but the antidotes for these 84,000 types of afflictive obscuring states. That's all for today.
Sunam de yedam je zegwanye tona nye pedanam pomchet Jegana je bala chubaye sigve chole ndo wai do wara